Fantastic. Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome to our pre-Shabbos Shuva Drasha. And on behalf of the Kehila, I'd like to extend our thanks to Liz and Josh Gordon for sponsoring this evening, and in honor of all the good work of Alan Zuck and everything that you do. So we appreciate the sponsorship of the Gordons, and we certainly appreciate the reason for their sponsorship as well. And may we all go forward with good and positive zechusim on our behalf, and as we lead into Yom Kippur this coming week. So thank you very much to our sponsors and to the support of the Kehila. Our topic for this evening is really multifaceted. Our topic is developing into the person whom we're really supposed to be. Now, that's a really good question of how do I know who I'm really supposed to be? And I think this is probably the greatest challenge that we have going into Yom Kippur. We're told, Chazal tell us that there is a Beis HaMikdash Lemata and there is a Beis HaMikdash Lemala. There's a heavenly Beis HaMikdash and there is a lower Beis HaMikdash. In other words, this world is a little bit of a mirror. And we sort of say that in the Kol Nidre as well. B'yeshiva shel mala, b'yeshiva shel mata. There is a yeshiva up above and there's a yeshiva down below. Just like Kol Nidre, we're meeting and we're having a tribunal up in heaven. There's a tribunal that is exactly mirroring what we are doing. There's a famous story of a chassid who once came to Rabbi Yitzchak of Berditchev, and he asked him permission. He wanted to leave the Beis Medrash early. And Rabbi Yitzchak said, "Why are you in such a hurry?" And the chassid answered, "Rebbe," he says, "I'm going to be leading the tefillos in Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and I need to review the machzor." And the machzor, says Rabbi Yitzchak, he says, the machzor is not going to change. It's more important to review your deeds and prepare yourself. We are capable of change. The machzor is not going to change. And it's, the Chafetz Chaim always said that it's not the person who pounds his chest with great strength who's forgiven. He says, but the person who's al chet pounds within him because of the sins which they committed. There is and in this season, we sort of all have to answer the Ger Rebbe's question. That Bacher came to the Ger Rebbe in Yerushalayim, and he introduced himself to the Ger Rebbe. And the Rebbe asked where he's from, what yeshiva you study in, what do you do? So the Bacher tells the Ger Rebbe, he says, I learn in yeshivas Or Sameach. And for those of you that may not be aware, I think we're all aware of yeshivas Or Sameach. It caters mostly to the Baalei Tshuva, and at least that's how it started out. And certainly it's become much more broad, but that was the basis of how the yeshiva started. So the Bacher tells the Ger Rebbe, he says, I learned in yeshiva Or Sameach, but he's very quick to point out, and he says, but I'm not a Baal Tshuva. And the Ger Rebbe looks at him and he says, Favos nisht. Why not? And that's really a question that we have to answer today. And that question is, why not? Why aren't we Baalei Tshuva? And indeed, there are a number of questions that we're going to have this evening and which we have to confront. And this is all part of the process of tshuva. And I want to point out that it really is a process. Tshuva is a process. It's not something that one can decide to do in the spur of the moment. I mean, one can start the process of tshuva, but it's definitely a process. And that's what the pasuk means when it says, and we're going to quote this pasuk often tonight, Nach b'sa dirachenu v'nach kora v'nashuva elecha. Let's examine our ways. V'nach kora. Let's examine ourselves. And then And only then, v'nashuva elecha. In order to come to the madrega, in order to come to the level of tshuva, we first have to go through a process which is called nachbesa dirachenu. Let's examine our ways. And then further, the next step after that is v'nachkora. Let's be introspective. Let's look at ourselves. And then, and only then, v'nashuva elecha. And the first step of nachbesa dirachenu, that first step presents us with significant difficulties, because whenever we stand looking at our ways and we start examining our mitzvos and our ma'asim tovim, we pretty much, and really I'm speaking for myself in this way, we come to the conclusion that after all, we're pretty good. We're pretty good people. I mean, let's think about it. We live in one of the most prestigious, one of the most chashuva communities in North America. And we start with nachbasa dirachenu. We look at our ways and we pretty much always come to the same pleasant conclusion that we're good. We have, throughout our communities, and certainly in Toronto, we have many Shomrei Shabbos, and certainly there's multiple Batei Midrashos, yeshivos, mikvos, and we're learning Torah, we're keeping mitzvos. There are so many tzedakah organizations, and new ones pop up each year in order to help people who are in particular needy situations, loan societies. And when you look what's out there, I mean, we're pretty much tzaddikim. Nachbasa derachenu. We looked and we liked what we saw. We're pretty good. We're doing pretty good out there. But that's extremely dangerous. I mean, to sit on one's laurels and to sort of tap ourselves on our collective backs is very dangerous, because it's not true. And there really is what to be desired. And actually, there's a facet in the tshuva process that directly speaks at us and speaks to this issue of becoming too complacent and thinking that we're really pretty good. We, in this Kehila Kedosha Hazeh, in our frum community, is a parsha in the Torah, a parsha that deals directly with us, that speaks directly to us. And that parsha is in Parshas Kisavo. And it talks about Vidui Maisros, a confessional. There's a parsha in the Torah that's called Vidui Maisros. It's a confessional of a person's accounting when it comes to the mitzvah of Meiser. And there is a famous kasha. Why is that parsha in the Torah called Vidui Maisros? And if you look at the parsha in the Torah, the parsha says that a Jew has to get up and he has to say, and he has to give an accounting to whether he did the mitzvah of Meiser. And in that parsha, he makes a vidui. He makes a confessional, and he says, "V'gam nasati v'la Levi v'la ger v'la yasam v'la almana asisi kechol asher tzivisani." I've given to whoever deserves the Meiser. Asisi, indeed, I've done it. Kechol asher tzivisani, all that you have commanded me to do. I'm a pretty good guy, God. So the question is, why is it then called vidui Meiseros? I mean, on Yom Kippur, we know what vidui is. Vidui is on Yom Kippur when we get up and we say, Chatasi, Avisi, Pashati Lifanecha, and we're going to stand there with the Al-Chaitz and we're going to clap, Al-Chait this and Al-Chait that. That is vidui. Why is there a parsha in the Torah when one says, Asisi kechol asher tzivisani, I've done all that you've commanded me to do? Why is that called vidui? Where's the confessional in that? So, says Rav Yoshe Ber Soloveitchik Zatzal, that the vidui of that parsha lies in the words, a careful reading of the words of that parsha. Asisi kechol asher tzivisani. Because if the person is perfect, if the person has been fulfilling the mitzvahs exactly, why is it asisi kichol asher tzivisani? I've done like I'm supposed to do. Kichol, like I'm supposed to do. Why doesn't the parsha just say asisi kol asher tzivisani? Read the words carefully. Asisi kichol asher tzivisani. So Rabbi Yoshe Ber Soloveitchik says, Zatzal, that is precisely the vidui. Because the Parsha of Vidui Maestros addresses a person who has given the Maestros. Yes, he's been Mekayim the mitzvah of tzedakah, but not precisely, not exactly. He's not done it exactly. Why? Because he's waited. Comes the third year, he has to go ahead and he has to give Maestros, which have accumulated in his home over the 3 years of the Meiser cycle. Yes, he's fulfilling the mitzvah of Maestros, but not exactly. It's only kichol asher tzivisani, almost, but not perfectly. And that, says Rabbi Yoshe Ber, is a parsha of vidui, that a person has to do tshuva for. Yes, I'm frum. Yes, I am mekayim the mitzvos, but my kiyum has not really been exact. It's not been precise. It's been kichol. And this is what we have to ask ourselves in Nachbesa Dirachenu. In that first sentence of that pasuk, in the examining of our ways, we first have to take a look at the overall picture of who we are. Before we can say who we want to become and go through the process, let's take a clear, unadulterated picture of who we are. And to ask ourselves, are our mitzvos kol asher tzivisani? Are we doing the mitzvos exactly like they're supposed to be? Or is it merely kichol asher tzivisani? Almost, but not good enough. Yes, we observe our Shabbos. But is our Shabbos really the Shabbos the way Chazal wanted Shabbos to be? What are we supposed to be doing throughout Shabbos? Yes, we're supposed to have shalosh seudot. But throughout those 3 meals at our Shabbos tables, what is the kedusha that's emanating from the Shabbos table? Do we have a defined time? Do we fill the Shabbos Avira with Divrei Torah, and Zemiros, and finding out what happened with our children and grandchildren at work and in school, or does it sometimes, devolve into, did the guy who get maftir, say it nicely or not? Is it the pennant race? Is it, are we talking about, the Blue Jays? Is it kichol asher tzivisani, or is it kol asher tzivisani? And I realize that we're trying to divide a fine line over here, but this is what Rav Soloveitchik tells us. We have to really take a look at what we're doing, and we have to see if we're being true to ourselves. We all daven, but do we always make every attempt to daven b'tzibur? I mean, it's a challenge in the mornings. And sometimes we're downtown, different parts of the city, and there's a couple of different apps on the phone now which are available to find the closest minyan. And you can get out there, and even in the wintertime, you can find a mincha minyan. So is it kol asher tzivisani, or is it kichol asher tzivisani? Yes, we're parents and grandparents. Yes, we have children, and we fulfill the mitzvah of Peru Ravu, says Reb Shimshon Raphael Hirsch. But Peru, says Reb Hirsch, means having children. Ravu means raising them. Do we raise our children and our grandchildren? Do we spend time with them? Do we learn with them? Even play games with them? Do we involve ourselves with them? Or do we count down the minutes so that we can have what we believe is to be peace of mind? When are they leaving? Is there anyone who can honestly say that we learn as much Torah as we can? I mean, I was discussing with one of my classes today that they asked me how many different websites there are to learn the various topics that we were learning in Gemara. And I said, there's 25 websites on Daf Yomi alone. There's probably another 10 websites that you can go to with just translation for the Gemara, let alone any kind of Perushim or anything like that. So all the opportunities are out there. Do we utilize them? Is it kol asher tzivisani, or is it kichol asher tzivisani? Now, I'm not going to go through the entire litany of mitzvos and averos, that any of us can improve on today, but kol adam yodea, or kol adam yodea nogea nafsho. Everyone knows where he or she can stand improvement. So when we do the Nachbesa Derachenu, when we take that first step in tshuva, let's not come to the pleasant conclusion that there's nothing to be done. Rather, let's remember the Parsha of Vidui Maestros and ask ourselves, is it Kol Asher Tzivisani or is it Kichol Asher Tzivisani? And that's step number one. That's so much now for Nachbesa Derachenu. Now we get into a little bit more difficult area. We get into an area of Benach Korah. This is much more challenging. We have to examine who we really are. The self-examination, the Nach Korah, the introspection. And this is something that all of us dread doing because it's a very unpleasant task for some of us. When we really stop to think who we are, because that to stop and to think of who we are, we have to confront another question. And it's a very old question. And as a matter of fact, it's to confront this question, which is, it's probably the oldest question in the history of mankind. Chazal tell us, Adam Nivra B'Rosh Hashanah. Adam Arishon was created on Rosh Hashanah. V'nidon Bo Bayom. And on that very same day, Adam Arishon was created, the first Rosh Hashanah of the world. Adam Arishon had din, he had judgment. And do you know what the din was? What was the essence of the din, of the judgment of Adam Arishon? Adam Arishon's din on that first Rosh Hashanah was one single solitary question. The one single solitary question, which is comprised of one single solitary word. And that question is, Ayeka. Where are you, Adam Arishon? But it means so much more than where are you. Chazal tell us that when the Ribono Shel Olam asked Adam Arishon after he first committed that first Aveira, that first fateful sin that changes the course of the entire world for all time, the Ribono Shel Olam comes to Adam Arishon on that first Rosh Hashanah and he asks him, Ayeka. And Chazal say, Etmol hayita misofa olam v'yad sofa v'yata b'toch atzei hagan. Adam, yesterday you were a person with unlimited potential. You were misofa olam. You were the Yitzir Kapav, says the Ribono Shel Olam. I created you with my very hands. You encompassed the entire world. You were a giant. And what happened to you, Adam? V'ata b'tzoch atzei hagan. And now you're hiding in the bushes in Gan Eden. Adam, what happened to you? What happened to all that vast potential? And that was the question of Ayeka. And that question of Ayeka, what happened to you, is a question that reverberates throughout all time. The Chol Davar Dar, the question comes back to each of us and each and every one of us is Ayeka. What's happening with us? Where are we? What happened to that great potential that we were created with? And that's what Benach Korah is all about. That in our self-examination, we have to look at ourselves and we have to ask who we really are. Where are we going? What's become of us? Because we believe that each and every one of us was created with a mission to do in this world. And that we have, so to speak, a very specific mission. And that we have a tachlis, and that we have a purpose. And one day, we're going to have to answer what happened to our potential. Did we exercise it or did we not? Did you accomplish your mission? And it's a process that's not accomplished, certainly by 20, not even by 40, when the world will have us believe that we're already in a decline, and certainly not even by 60. Chazal tell us a very, very interesting insight into Avram Avinu. Avram Avinu, Asar Nisyonos Nisasa Avram Avinu v'amad b'kulam. Avram Avinu was tested with 10 different nisyonos, 10 different challenges. You know what the implication of this statement is? That he was tested with 10 different challenges? That had Avram Avinu fulfilled 9 of those challenges, 9 nisyonot, but he had not fulfilled the 10th one, then Avram Avinu would have come up short. He would have come up wanting. And how old was Avram Avinu on that 10th Nisayon? He was 137 years old. If we would have looked at the career of Avram Avinu and look what he accomplished, he introduced man to the concept of monotheism. He created a religion. He fought off the world. He was a nefesh asher asa becharam. He was the Omer HaChesed. He accomplished. He brought people to godliness. He revolutionized the world. But if at the age of 137, had he stopped, then he would not have fulfilled his mission in life. The pasuk says that by the Akedah, the Malach comes to Avram right as he was about to sacrifice his son Yitzchak, and he calls out to him, Avram, Avraham. And the Yalkut Shimoni says, Avram la'ola, v'Avram lamata. That there are two Avrahams. There's the earthly Avraham, and then there's the heavenly Avraham. There's the Avraham milmata, and there's the Avram milmala. Like the yeshiva shel mala and the yeshiva shel mata. There is an Avraham on earth, and there is a mirror personality in heaven. Finally, at the age of 137, after a glorious career, and only then does the Malach proclaim, Avraham, Avraham. Finally, the Malach says, the images are exactly the same. The Avram down here coincides with the Avram in Shemayim. Finally, you've reached your tachlis. Finally, you've reached and fulfilled your mission. And had he done the 9 tests and failed on the 10th, Avram would not have reached the heavenly image of what was expected of him. And that's the way it is really with all of us. Before we come down to this earth, the Rabboni Shalom has an image of who we are and what we can be. And our life is devoted in trying to reach that godly image of who we all really are. There's a very famous story with the Nitziv, Rev Naftali Tzvi Yehuda Berlin. He was the Rosh Yeshiva of the Volozhiner Yeshiva, which is rightly called the granddaddy, the father of all the modern yeshivos in the world. The Nitziv was a prolific writer, and he wrote a magnum opus called the Ha'emek Shaila. And he wrote also the Tshuvas Meshiv Davar. He wrote the Meromei Sadeh Chidushei al Hashas. He wrote the Ha'emek Davar al Torah. The Nitziv was a Gaon Olam. And I'll never forget, I was once in a class, and the Rosh Yeshiva was explaining a kasha of the Nitziv, and the kasha was an extremely strange sounding kasha, and the Bachram really just started laughing when they heard the Nitziv's kasha. And the Rosh Yeshiva, Zechet Tzadik Levracha, he blew up, and he looked at all of us, and he said, "You're laughing at a kasha of the Nitziv?" He said, I remember this vividly. He said, if any of you would ever learn for 100 years, day and night, you wouldn't come to the fingertip of knowledge contained in the Nitziv. That's who the Nitziv was. So the Nitziv, when he was finished with the Ha'emek Shaila, the work on the Sheiltos, he made a siyum, he made a suda, he made a simcha. And he said, at that time, he asked everyone, he said, why am I making this simcha? First of all, because I finished the sefer, so you make a siyum. He says, but it's also a personal party, a personal celebration. And I'll tell you why. Because when I was young, the Nitziv started to explain, I once heard my parents talking. I heard my father crying to my mother and saying, what's going to become of Reb Naftali? I've tried to get him, I've gotten him malamdim, I've given him prizes, I've tried everything with him. He still fools around, he doesn't learn. I think it's about time that we faced reality. We sent him to learn a trade. And maybe he'll become a tailor, he'll become a shoemaker, but he won't have any shaykhs or connection in learning, so we just might as well start him off with some kind of a job training. So the Nitziv heard that, and he ran to his father and he cried and he said, I'm going to start over. I'm not going to fool around anymore. I'm going to buckle down. And he became the Nitziv, and the rest is history. So the Nitziv writes, I would have been a fine balabas. I would have gone into Erev Yom Kippur thinking, I do my malacha be'amuna, I don't cheat people, I'm an Erlich Yid, I'm fine. But then I would have come to Shemayim. After 120 years as a tailor or a shoemaker, and they would have asked me straightforward. They would look at me and they would say, Reb Naftali, where's the Ha'emek Shaila? Where's the Meshiv Davar? Where's the Meromei Sadeh? Where's the Emek Davar? And I looked at them and said, me? I'm just a balabas, I'm a Pashut Amaretz, I'm a shoemaker. What are you talking about? But the answer is, because there was a heavenly Nitziv, there was a godly Nitziv, and there was an earthly Nitziv. And had the Nitziv not done what he obviously did, he wouldn't have reached and matched that godly image. So what's everyone thinking right now? I know we're all thinking right now. I mean, it's a defense mechanism. Listen, I'm no Netziv, right? I'm not going to write Amek Shaila. I'm not going to write anything. But we're probably all comparable to someone like Reb David Dryans. There's a famous story about Reb David Dryans. Who's Rabbi David Dryans? He escaped Poland. He came to England in the probably in the late 40s, right after the war. Reb David Dryans is a Pashut Yid. He's a simple Jew. He's a Jew that many rabbis, they would say about him that he was a Tehillim, he was a Mishnayos kind of a Yid. He was an Erel Yid. He was a Talmud of the Chafetz Chaim. He never spoke full sentences, and that's how careful he was in avoiding Lashon Hara. He was, he was a shochet. He was a Pashut Yid. But you know who he was? He was the founder of the Gateshead Yeshiva in London. He was just a straightforward guy. He was a shochet. He goes to the city of England, 400 miles north of London, and he says, there's no yeshiva here in Gateshead. I can't live in a city without a yeshiva. I need a place to study. Yes, I'm a shochet, I'm at work, but afterwards I need a base medrash. I need a place to go learn. So he went to the Chafetz Chaim and he says, send me a Rosh Yeshiva. So the Chafetz Chaim sends him a Rosh Yeshiva. And then he starts running around London. He starts getting together a Bachar over here and a Bachar over there, and he starts the Gateshead Yeshiva with 6 Bacharim. That's how the yeshiva starts. And then he says, listen, they're growing. They're going to spend a number of years in study. We have to strengthen them for a year or two before they go out to work. I want a kollel. So he goes to the East End of London, and he finds a person by the name of Rabbi Eliyahu Dessler, a well-known name to all of us. And he's the one who starts the kollel in Gateshead. And then he starts the girls' school. He starts a seminary. Gateshead today is one of the most one of the most prominent communities in the European continent. And it was all started by just a simple individual who said, I have to live in a town with a yeshiva. So when Reb Shneir Kotler Zatzal from Lakewood heard this story, he commented the same thing. He said that Reb David Dryans would have gone to Shemayim, and had he not built Gateshead, they would have said to him, he would have come to Shemayim. He would have said, listen, I'm a shochet, my chalaf was always kosher, I never spoke Lashon Hara, and thinking he's coming there, it's going to be gavaldik. They're going to give him, the front row seats. He said, but then they would have asked him, but where's the yeshiva? Where's the seminary? Where's the kollel? Where's the whole community over here? And we'd say, me? I'm just a Pashut Yid. But there was a godly Reb David Dryans, and there was an earthly Reb David Dryan. And no matter how successful and how industrious we are, we always have to face this question. There is a mechanich in New York who studied by Reb Shraga Feivel Mendowitz. Just to give you just a little bit of background, Reb Shraga Feivel Mendowitz, may his memory be blessed forever and ever, he was the founder of the day school movement in North America. He was also the founder of the Torah Vodaas Yeshiva. And many of us really who have gone through the day school movements and children go through the day school movements are here today because of a Jew by the name of Reb Shraga Feivel Mendowitz. And this mechanech, this teacher says, he was listening to one of the shmuzin from Reb Shraga Feivel, and there's one image though he'll never forget. It was before Rosh Hashanah, and as was his custom, he would translate it and he explained the tefillos, and he comes to the section of Zichronos. And he comes to that section in Zichronos, where we say, Maise ish uvkudaso, that the Rabbanu Shalom is going to judge us, Maise ish, the actions of man, uvkudaso. And Reb Shraga Feivel asked, what does uvkudaso mean? Maise ish means his deeds. But what does uvkudaso mean? Reb Shraga Feivel says, uvkudaso means his tafkid. Uvkudaso means his tachlis. Uvkudaso means his purpose. And that's the din on Rosh Hashanah. Not only are you good or not good, but have you been fulfilling your tachlis? Are you fulfilling your ufkudaso? At which point, Reb Shraga Feivel, the starter, the originator, the founder of the day school movement in North America, he breaks down and he says, how does a person ever know if they've ever fulfilled their tachlis? He's crying and he walks out of the room. And that's the image that this teacher had of Reb Shraga Feivel. Now, here's a Jew who was furthered Torah in America. And that's not an exaggeration. I mean, he was the person who was the founder of day schools. He laid the foundation for the Jewish survival in America. He built the Yeshiva Torah Vodaas. And here he is, he's crying. Does a person ever know, speaking about himself, if they really ever fulfilled his tachlis? And there's no age limit in this either. You know, here in North America, when you're 65, companies and the general Weltanschauung has this idea that time to collect your pension, get your Social Security, and that's it. But that's not how my old Rosh Yeshiva felt. He revealed once in a very intimate conversation with a Talmud at the end of his life. He said that he could barely walk, and he would tell the Talmud, he would say, I really have accomplished a lot in my younger years. He didn't say it, but the fact is that he probably learned Shas more than once. And he wrote many Chedushei Torah, and he helped build the yeshiva and the base medrash. And he's crying to this Talmud, and he says, but what am I doing in my older years? What am I doing now? What am I doing with myself? That's what I did in the past, but what am I doing now? And the Rosh Yeshiva consoled himself, and he said that there was a student in the yeshiva who was a Baal Tshuva, and his parents cut him off. They didn't want to pay tuition anymore. So the Rosh Yeshiva took a personal interest in him. He paid all of his personal expenses. He paid everything, anything that he needed. He paid his car insurance. It was everything. He encouraged him, and he said, at least I'm doing something later on. It's true. Started a yeshiva, and I've done many things, but Maisa Yishuv Kudaso. The implication of this is really frightening. There's another parsha in Tanakh that I want to share with you as well. There's a Maisa with Navus and with Achav. It's a long story, but to make a long story short, Achav was a wicked king, and there was a fellow who had a piece of land next to Achav's palace. And Achav comes to him one day and he says, listen, I want your property, and I'll pay you whatever you want for it. I'll give you a better piece of land for it, but give me your land. And in essence, Achav told him, listen, I'm going to make you a deal that you can't refuse. And unfortunately, Navus refuses. And when you refuse the king, Achav complains to his wicked wife, Izebel, the Jezebel, and she says to him, no problem, I'll take care of it. So she had two witnesses come and falsely testify that Navus, this guy with the field, committed some type of a capital offense, and they paskin that he's chayiv misa, and they kill Navus. And Achav takes his field, end of problem, end of story. Now Navus, this poor innocent man who merely said, I can't give away this field that God gave me, he dies a terrible death. Why does he die such a terrible death? Now, what did Navus do? There's got to be some kind of a background over here to what happened. So the Yalkut Shimoni says the following, and it's an unbelievable Yalkut, and it's a very serious statement. The pasuk says, Kabedes Hashem me kolcha, she'im haya kolcha noah avra lifnei hateva. The Yalkut says that a person is mechuyev to honor Hashem with whatever God gave us. And if you have a beautiful voice, you should daven for the Yamid. And continues the Yalkut, Navus hayakolal noeh, Navus had a beautiful voice. V'haya ola liyushalayim v'chol Yisrael miskantzin l'shmo eskola. He was the Jewish Pavarotti. He was, I don't want to, everyone has their own favorite Jewish vocalist. Pick your favorite Jewish vocalist. He was the tops. He used to come to Yerushalayim on the Shalosh Regalim, and this Navus, he davened for the Yamid, and people used to come from all over and hear the beautiful voice of Navus. Pamach, that's one time. Lo Allah. He said, listen, I've had it. I don't want to daven for the Yamid anymore. I'm tired of davening. Not going to daven. So the Yalkut says, for that, he met his terrible fate. And says Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky Zatzal, that's what it means in not fulfilling one's tachlis. That a person has energies, a person has kochos, you have abilities, and that means that the Ribono Shel Olam gave you certain things for the purpose, for a specific purpose. You have to fulfill them, not deny them. And this is what happens, God forbid, if a person denies his essence. Obviously, Navus must have been a tzaddik, but this is what happens to a person who denies the tzibur of his talents. Now, there's another question in V'nach Korah, the self-examination. That's always the question of why me, but not the question of why me and we always ask ourselves, but a different why me. A why me sort of with a different twist. In the Yom Kippur davening, we say a very strange tefillah. At the end of Shemona Esrei, every Shemona Esrei of Yom Kippur ends with Eloka achalona tzarti eni chadai, Ribono Shel Olam, up until the time that I was created, eni chadai. it wasn't worthwhile. And now that I've been created, now that I've been created, it wouldn't be it's as if I wasn't created at all. So says Rav Avram Yitzchak Cohen Cook, do you know what that means? Until I was created, I wasn't worthwhile. That all of us were put on this earth in a certain time period, in a certain era, in a certain epoch. Elokai, ad shelon atzarti, eini chadai. I wasn't supposed to be born in the 6th century. Elokai, I wasn't supposed to be born in the 1800s. Elokai, ad shelon atzarti, eini chadai. Until I was created, until this century, until this period, eini chadai. V'achshav shenotzarti. Now, finally came the tekufa. Finally came the era that I'm supposed to do something with my life. And now that I'm finally here in the 21st century, eini chadai. What am I doing with myself? And that is the concept of why we are here now. And that's why it has such significance for us. I think for many of us, with family that escaped and were survivors from the Holocaust, Ud Mutzel Meyesh, and we ask ourselves, Ad Shalom Atzarti, Hashem, you didn't want my family to perish in the Holocaust. They survived. And we're from the very holy Jews that created this community and that created the school systems that we have here in Toronto. And you didn't want me to be part of that generation. You wanted me to survive. So we all ask ourselves the question, why am I here? Why did I make it? Why did my grandparents, great-grandparents, why did they survive? There but for the grace of God go I, and you, and you, and you. I mean, we always hear stories of people who survive a plane crash. They walk away from the crash unscathed and they say, that means something. And they all passed away, but I lived. That means something. So I'm going to do something special with my life. And if I walked out of that inferno, if I walked away from that crash, so I'm going to make my life meaningful. We, as much of the Jewish community in North America, we walked away. And we should really deal with that question also of why me? And that's another question of anachkora, of self-introspection. Why me? And there are so many stories of people who said, why me? I remember there was an article many years ago in National Geographic, and it was talking about how the essence of wool and wool purveyors and how they sell wool. And in the article, they have a picture of this Jew. His name is Joseph Rosenberger. And who is Joseph Rosenberger? He survived the Holocaust, and he felt to himself, he said, listen, if I survived, I somehow have to take a mitzvah and I have to make it special. I don't know if you know that he was the founder of the Shatnez laboratories in North America. He took pretty much a mitzvah, he rescues it from oblivion that, 40, 50 years ago, if you'd go into a store, you never would even thought about Shatnez. And, you'd ask the salesman, you say, Shatnez, and he would say, yeah, it's kosher. And this is a guy who said, listen, here's a mitzvah, I can take it up and I can do something with it. And that's what he does. He says, my life had a specific purpose. He takes this mitzvah, and all of a sudden now, we're concerned about Shatnez in our clothing. So now we can begin this whole process. We asked ourselves this questions, we have several questions already. It's a process. The process requires time. It requires patience. It requires thinking. And a person needs to sit down with their spouse and ask themselves, what can we do? How can we both be better? What mitzvah should we adopt? What are we going to make special? Or maybe sit down with a friend, with a rabbi, you sit down with yourself and you think. Nach besad derachenu. Think. Ayeka, where are you? Think. Why me? But what will we do? Will we be inspired today? Tomorrow morning, we're going to get up and do our business as usual. But it's the Aser Simei Tshuva. So we're going to busy ourselves. We're going to start looking for things to do. We're going to start getting ready to build a sukkah, and we're going to start getting ready for the Arba Minim, everything. all noble deeds. And the Shulchan Aruch says that a person should be misasek in mitzvahs and aseres yemei tshuva. But we're all going to avoid what's demanded of us. We won't think. We don't want to deal with it. There are so many things to help us avoid thinking. It's too scary. It's very painful asking ourselves, who are we? Where are we going? And so we don't want to deal with it. And we'll come to Yom Kippur, and we'll definitely do our tshuva very dutifully. We'll stand there, we'll clap al chet, and we'll say we're going to speak less Lashon Hara, we're going to learn more Torah, we're going to be more honest in our business, and we're going to go through the whole process on Yom Kippur. But we're still not really going to deal with it. We still won't ask ourselves, who are you and where you're going? We won't ask ourselves the question, Ayeka. We won't say to ourselves, where are you and what happened to you? Now, Chazal knew that. And Chazal knew us very well. And Chazal said, we're not going to let you get through Yom Kippur without dealing with this. And this is my concluding thought for the evening. We have something, said Chazal, for people like you, speaking to the majority of Jewry. And there in the waning hours of Yom Kippur, when it's almost at the end, and we start clock watching and we start figuring out whether or not we're going to make it, Chazal said, listen to Maftir Yonah. What's the message in Maftir Yonah? We think that the message is merely that there was a city called Nineveh, and the city did Averos, they didn't do tshuva, and that's the story of Yom Kippur. Pretty simple. But there's another message in Yonah. Yonah is a person that wants to run away. Yonah is a person that God has a mission for. Yonah is a person that has destiny waiting for him. And what does Yonah do? Yonah tries to run away. I don't want to face my destiny. I don't want to deal with Ayeka. I don't want to deal with the burden of the mission. I don't want the achrayus of this goal. So he runs away to Tarshish, and the Rabbanu Shalom runs after him. Yonah, you're not getting away. So he runs to the sea, and the Rabbanu Shalom runs after him and says, Yonah, you can't get away. So he runs to the bottom of the boat, and Rabbanu Shalom says, you can't get away. And he runs further, and he goes to sleep, and he tries to escape the question, Ayeka, where are you, Yonah? And they wake him up from his sleep, and he runs deeper. He jumps into the sea, but the Rabbanu Shalom says, Yonah, you're not getting away. And that's the message of Yonah. And that's what Chazal wanted us to hear in those final hours of Yom Kippur. Good, we've done tshuva from Lashon Hara. Good, we've done tshuva from Bittul Torah. But what are you doing? Ayeka, why me? Why am I here? What's my mission? And those questions are going to haunt us. And that's what Maftir Yonah does to us. If nothing else helps, really, the tshuva and the aseres yemei tshuva may not have helped. Yom Kippur may not have helped. But Yonah wakes us up to the question of Ayeka. And finally, we're ready to do tshuva. Finally, we're ready to deal with the real tshuva. And we go into that tefillah called Ne'ilah. We go into those 2 hours, which are the most wonderful 2 hours of the year. We go into that tefillah after a mincha, which we thought we couldn't make it. We dig down deep, just like those athletes that knows that the end is coming. You dig down for something deeper and you say, I'm going to deal with it. I'm going to deal with the Ayeka. I'm going to think about myself. I'm really finally ready to do tshuva. And you get to that Ne'ilah and you're ready to do the tshuva. And you look for the al-chaitz, and there's no al-chaitz. No al-chaitz in the Ne'ilah. But I want to do tshuva. I finally want to do tshuva. I'm ready for it. Where are the al-chaitz? The answer is because Ne'ilah contains the ultimate tshuva. You don't need al-chait in Ne'ilah because the Ne'ilah itself is the tshuva. Because if you look in Ne'ilah, we say, L'man nechtal me'oshek yadenu. We tell the Rabbanu Shalom, I don't want to steal. And the Chedushei Harim, the Ger Rebbe says, where's the mitzvah of tshuva written? It's a mitzvah in the Torah called vidui. Where is it written? He says, not in Achremos, not in Bamidbar, not in Pinchas. The mitzvah is v'hizvaduas avonam asher chatu. Do you know where the vidui is? He says it's in the Parsha of Gezel. Because that, says the Chedushei Harim, is the ultimate vidui. Gezel, stealing from the Rabbanu Shalom. God gave us certain abilities, strengths. He put me here. He gave us certain tachlis. And I hope I don't steal those kochos. I hope I don't steal those strengths. I hope I don't steal those means. But sometimes we don't do what the Rabbanu Shalom has asked of us. And that's the ultimate vidui. Vidui doesn't mean al-chet. Ne'ilah means those 4 words. Laman nechtal me'oshek yadenu. Please, Hashem, I want to do tshuva. I want to stop stealing the life that you gave me. You gave me tremendous potential. I want to do something with my kochos. I want to do something with my life. And that's when we reach tshuva. And then finally, in those last moments, we say, Lama nechtal me'oshek yodenu. I'm going to be different. I'm not going to be satisfied with just being good. I'm going to be great. I'm going to use those strengths. I'm going to put those kochos where they belong, and not in the hevel, in the nothingness, but I'm going to use those special kochos that you gave me, God, to stop taking those things from you and to use them for the purpose that you've given me. And that's v'nachbasa dirachenu. I'm going to be that person that you have, that vision of me in Shemayim. I'm going to be that individual whom you really want to be. When the Malach called out Avraham, that's when Avram knew that he had completed his mission. At the end of Ne'ilah, hopefully all of us will be able to look at things and say, we're ready now to say that that vision that God has of us is the vision that we're ready to make of ourselves. And it takes tremendous siyata d'shmaya, and that is my bracha to each and every one of us as we go into the Yom Kippur, that God give us the ability to see our true strengths and to utilize them. There's so much good that can be done at any time of life, at any point in our lives. We just have to ask ourselves, what more can we do? What mitzvah can we take upon ourselves? And what area can we really use to shape who God meant us to be? Think about the Netziv. Think about the great individuals who created and did so much, and they weren't the Netziv, but they did things that they never thought that they were capable of doing. There's so many stories that we could touch on. I think we've touched on a number of them this evening. I want to thank you for being here with me this evening and doing a little bit of this self-exploration and trying to be the best version of ourselves that we could be. And I think we've begun the process, and with God's help, we'll be able to complete that process with Ne'ilah on Yom Kippur this year. I'm wishing you all a Shana Tova, a Siva V'chsima Tova, a Gesund and a gebencht Yor for us and for all of our families. Thank you very much, everyone.
Shana Tova. Oh, Shkoyach, very nice.
Thank you. And a Gemar Fatima Tova to everyone. And thank you again. And looking forward to seeing you in Shul, God willing, on Shabbos and on Yom Kippur as well. Thank you. Have a good evening, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Have a good night.
Josh, Liz, Shkoyach.
Thank you. That was very inspiring. Very thought-provoking.
I'm glad that you
Extremely
enjoyed it.
good. Extremely
There's more where
good.
that came from.
Good. Looking forward to it.
Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Thank you.